Today's video has been on my watch list for so long and I haven't got around to doing it until now. We are going to look at Ned Kelly, the man behind the mask. Let's go. Oh, and make sure you like and subscribe.
June 28, 1880, Glenrowan, a small town in Victoria, Australia. The police have a small hotel surrounded. Members of Ned Kelly's gang create a diversion, allowing Ned to sneak out. Just past dawn, Ned creeps up, flanking the police line, and then starts firing. The police scramble, caught off guard by the strange armored figure emerging from the fog. They shoot back, but Ned seems impervious to their bullets. He keeps advancing toward the police, shooting and taunting them as he comes. Diving to the ground to avoid a bullet, a policeman realizes the figure's legs are unprotected. He shoots low, crippling and eventually bringing the armored figure to the ground.
I'm pretty sure from images, I will get an image up, but I'm pretty sure that was not the style of mask, was it? If I'm wrong, it'll be in an image up on the screen.
Finally captured the notorious bushranger Ned Kelly. Edward Ned Kelly was born in December 1854 in the British colony of Victoria, Australia. He was the third of 8 children for Irish parents Ellen and John Red Kelly. His father Red was a convict. He had been found guilty of stealing 2 pigs in Ireland and was transported to Australia. As a boy, Kelly attained basic schooling and spent a lot of time in the bush. At age 11, Kelly, at great risk to himself, bravely saved 7-year-old Richard Shelton, who was drowning in Hughes Creek. Shelton's family presented Kelly with a green sash as a...
So, right from the start, it seems like from his family life, he didn't necessarily have it easy, but he was coming across as a good kid. Yeah, that's the initial thought. He was a good kid from a tough background.
As a thank you, Kelly would wear the sash under his armor during his final confrontation with the police. By this time, the Kelly family had moved to Avenel, Victoria. They were frequently targeted by the local police due to Red's criminal past, as well as the Kelly family's status as selectors. Selectors were settlers who came to Victoria to claim land given to them by the Crown. However, by the 1850s, many large tracts of land had been claimed by squatters. Exacerbating the tension, newer immigrants tended to come from Ireland and were Catholic as opposed to the original settlers from England who were Protestant. In 1865, when he couldn't pay the fine, Red was sentenced to 6 months hard labor at Kilmer Jail for unlawful possession of a bullock hide. Upon release, Red drank heavily, which had an ill effect on his health. He ended up dying from dropsy on December 26, 1866. His father's run-ins and subsequent incarceration with the authorities would have a profound effect on Kelly.
So I think this highlights again that Ned Kelly had a tough upbringing. Seeing if you are constantly seeing your father in trouble with the law, being picked up by the police constantly, then you see it in everyday life these days that it has quite often a detrimental effect for the child. That how often does the child then turn out to be a model citizen, however you want to say it. So straight away you can understand why he would have a problem with the authorities, should we say.
After his father's death, 12-year-old Kelly became his family's breadwinner and quickly turned to a life of crime to support them. He gained a reputation with the local authorities who were frustrated. They knew that Kelly was committing crimes but were never able to convict him. A few years later, the Kelly family selected 88 acres of uncultivated farmland at 11 Mile Creek near the Greta area of Victoria. In 1869, 14-year-old Kelly met bushranger Harry Power, a transported convict who became an outlaw after escaping Melbourne's Pentridge prison. Power became a bushranging mentor to young Kelly.
I tell you what, straight away, right? We're only 2 minutes 45 in. Straight away, you see this nowadays, don't you? So if I can link this with today's, you could link it with old Oliver Twist. That sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? Getting in with the wrong crowd. But you see it now with young adults and teenagers being used by drug dealers to shift their gear. and then they're in the system, and their life is pretty much ruined from then. So it's amazing that exactly the same situation happens now. Time moves on, but doesn't change, it seems.
However, they split up after being shot at during a failed horse robbery. In the spring of 1870, Kelly reconciled with Power. Over the next year, the pair committed a series of armed robberies. In early May, Kelly was captured by police and confined to Beechworth Jail. Kelly ended up beating the 3 robbery charges, the first 2 of which were dismissed as none of the victims could positively identify him. For the 3rd charge, no evidence was produced in court, and he was released after a month. Power often camped at Glenmore Station, a large property owned by Kelly's maternal grandfather, James Quinn. In June 1870, while at a mountain shelter overlooking the property, Power was captured by a police search party. Following Power's arrest, word spread within the community that Kelly had snitched. Kelly denied the rumor and actually wrote a letter to the police sergeant pleading for help in clearing his name. The informant turned out to be Kelly's uncle, Jack Lloyd, who received $603 for his tip. On April 20th, 1871, while riding a fine chestnut mare that he had borrowed from a horsebreaker, Isaiah Wright, Kelly was intercepted by Constable Edward Hall, who suspected that the horse was stolen. He directed Kelly to the police station on the pretense of having to sign some paperwork. As Kelly dismounted from the horse, Hall tried to grab him by the scruff of the neck, but missed. When Kelly fought back, resisting arrest, Hall drew his revolver and tried to shoot him, but the gun misfired 3 times. Hall was then overpowered by Kelly. 7 bystanders had to help Hall subdue Kelly. When Kelly was finally trussed, Hall pistol-whipped Kelly's face to a bloody pulp. Though Kelly maintained his innocence, he was still implicated for his part in Wright's horse-stealing scheme, which also involved Kelly's brother-in-law, Alex Gunn. Both Kelly and Gunn ended up being sentenced to 3 years hard labor.
Ouch.
Wright received 18 months. Kelly was released 6 months early for good behavior on February 2nd, 1874.
Going along with what I've already just said about, the poor upbringing, having the police constantly on your back, whether it started off him actually not necessarily doing anything wrong, but the police still wanting him, trying to make out like he was doing something wrong. After a while, you will end up doing something because you're just like, well, if they're going to go after me, I might as well do something. So I think the attitude he would have had surely would be, well, they're going to try and get me anyway. I might as well do it.
To settle his beef with Wright, Kelly fought him in a bare-knuckle boxing match at the Imperial Hotel in Beechworth on August 8, 1874. Kelly won after 20 rounds. A Melbourne photographer took a portrait of Kelly in a boxing pose, and he garnered local fame. Kelly continued to have various run-ins with the police. In the spring of 1878, he and his brother Dan were forced to go on the run after they allegedly shot Constable Alexander Fitzpatrick, who had come to the Kelly home to arrest them for horse theft. Fitzpatrick exaggerated the incident, saying that he was attacked by Kelly as well as Dan, their mother Ellen, a neighbor Bricky Williamson, and Kelly's brother-in-law Bill Skillion. The Kelly brothers managed to escape into the bush, while Miss Kelly, Skillion, and Williamson were arrested. Upon what Kelly claimed was Fitzpatrick's false evidence, the 3 were tried and convicted of attempted murder against Fitzpatrick. Skillion and Williamson both received sentences of 6 years, while Ellen received 3 years of hard labor, though Mrs. Kelly's sentence was considered overly harsh and unfair, even for non-Kelly sympathizers. A reward of $120 was offered for Kelly's arrest. The Kelly brothers went into hiding, camping out in the hills near their family homestead. The police searched for the outlaws but were unable to find them due to Kelly's superior knowledge of the area. Later, the Kellys were joined by their friends Joe Byrne and Steve Hart. The police received a tip as to where the Kelly gang was camped out. On October 25, 1878, 2 police parties were secretly dispatched from different directions with the intention of trapping the Kellys. At Stringy Bark Creek, one of the police teams set up a campsite. A policeman shot some parrots for dinner, and the gunfire alerted the Kellys as to the camp's presence. They ambushed the police, taking 1 police officer hostage and killing 2 more. The hostage was able to escape the outlaws and alert the authorities. The public was outraged at the murder of the police officers, and the bounty on the Kellys was raised to $603.
It's a tricky one. So at the start, I feel almost sorry for Ned Kelly. With everything I've said, the upbringing and everything, and almost being punished for something he's not necessarily done. But what would the police have done if they caught Ned Kelly in this instance? Now, was Ned Kelly just defending himself? I don't know. And unless you were there, which I don't think anyone watching my videos or alive today would have been there. So no one knows. But was he defending himself? Was it a crime that he didn't have to commit? Because obviously murder, there isn't much worse, is there? So did he have to commit it? I don't know. Now, I think if he's on this level, by doing that, wham, he is now gone to a different level that he possibly didn't need to go to.
On October 31st, 1878, the Victorian Parliament passed the Felons Apprehension Act, which outlawed the gang and made it possible for anyone to shoot them on sight. The law also penalized anyone who assisted the outlaws or withheld or gave false information about them to the authorities. On December 9, 1878, the Kelly gang held up Young Husband's station, cutting the telegraph wires to the town and robbing the bank. They treated their temporary hostages well, and no harm came to anyone. In January of 1879, the police arrested 23 of the Kelly gang's friends and sympathizers without cause. They were held without charges for over 3 months. Public opinion began to change. Many Australians were coming to identify with Ned Kelly due to police retaliation and the supercilious attitudes of the authorities. Much of the population saw the police as corrupt bullies, protecting wealthy squatters and discriminating against poor selectors. In February 1879, the Kelly gang raided the small town of Jerilderie. They took the few officers at the town's police station hostage, impersonating them for a time, and then robbed the local bank and the Royal Hotel. While at the hotel, Kelly gave a speech to several hostages, mainly discussing the Fitzpatrick incident and the Stringy Bark killings. Kelly also gave a letter to a bank accountant and demanded that he deliver it to the editor of the local newspaper. The Jerilderie letter, as it came to be called, was 56 handwritten pages long, dictated by Kelly to Byrne over a period of time. The letter justified Kelly's actions, outlining the injustices he and his family suffered at the hands of the police. He also denounced the oppression of poor Irish Catholic selector families by Victoria's squattocracy. Only small excerpts of the letter were published. Most of it was suppressed by the authorities. Still, public opinion continued to swing in favor of the Kelly gang.
I can certainly understand why opinions would swing towards Ned Kelly and his gang. I say this again, but how relatable is this to even modern times now with how some police officers are? You know, we've already had a situation, it is the Saturday the 12th of February 2022, and we've just had the head police person, Cressida Dick, resign due to failings of the police with misogyny and racism and homophobia. You know, so even now, things aren't much different. And that's generalizing because, as I said, my best friend is a policeman and he does what is right. But back then, there would have been surely less, what's the word? You know, the police would be, they could almost do what they want. There's less structure and punishment if a police officer does something wrong. I can't think of the words. That's going to annoy me. Back then, they could get away with corruption. You would think possibly a lot easier than now because of the time and the era and the technology and things.
In response to the Jerilderie raid, the New South Wales government and several banks collectively issued a $9,657 bounty, the equivalent to $1.5 million in modern Australian money, for the capture of the Kelly gang, dead or alive. From early March 1879 to June 1880, the trail went cold. Nothing was heard of the gang's whereabouts. Allegedly, during this time, the gang discussed their plans for the future, even considering trying to go overseas to America. On February 9, 1880, the Felons Apprehension Act lapsed and the gang's arrest warrants expired. While the Kelly brothers still had prior warrants outstanding for the attempted murder of Constable Fitzpatrick, technically Hart and Byrne were free men, although the police could still reissue the murder warrants. In April 1880, a notice of withdrawal of reward was posted by the government. It stated that after July 20, 1880, the government would withdraw the bounty on the Kelly gang. Meanwhile, the police monitored houses belonging to relatives of the gang, including that of Byrne's mother. The police used the house of her neighbor, Aaron Sherritt, as the base of operations. Sherritt received payment for providing information on the bushrangers' activities. Some police thought that Sherritt was a double agent in cahoots with the gang, but convinced that he was a traitor, the gang plotted to murder him. On June 26, 1880, they besieged Sherritt's home, shooting him in cold blood. They also shot at his wife and 4 police officers who happened to be inside the house. They started preparing to burn the house down before abruptly stopping and riding off. The Kelly gang assumed that the policeman inside Sherritt's home would relay news of his murder to town by early Sunday morning, prompting a special police train being sent from Melbourne and picking up reinforcements in Benalla to apprehend them. And
See, situations like that, I don't necessarily think helps the Ned Kelly gang at all. You know, I understand they are trying to stop the kind of the snitching, which they believe happened. You know, snitches get stitches and all that. But it's almost occasionally going too far. You know, where do you draw the line of justice and being murderers?
Anticipating this action, Kelly and his gang rode to the small town of Glenrowan with a grand plan: derail the special police train, shoot dead any survivors, then ride to the now unpoliced town of Benalla, where they would rob the banks, set fire to the courthouse, and generally wreak havoc. Perhaps they could get the locals to rise up and help them declare the Republic of Northeast Victoria. Unable to damage the train tracks themselves, the gang forced local railroad workers to destroy the tracks near the town. The gang took over Glenrowan without meeting resistance and imprisoned 62 citizens at Ann Jones's Glenrowan Inn. Hours passed without any sign of the train. By Sunday afternoon, the gang allowed the hostages to drink and play games. They actually danced with some of the hostages, and Dan Kelly and Joe Byrne got drunk. As Sunday night wore on, Kelly grew increasingly anxious over the train's non-arrival. The delay was caused by the fact that news of the murder did not reach Melbourne until Sunday afternoon. The police train finally approached Glenrowan at about 3 a.m. Monday morning. One of the hostages who had been allowed to leave the hotel managed to alert the train driver to the gang's plan. The train then slowly traversed the tracks into Glenrowan. Around this time, Kelly decided to let more townspeople go home, but the hotel owner and Jones told them to stay to hear the outlaw lecture. Byrne interrupted, alerting the group that the train was finally coming. The gang prepared for action, pulling out their secret weapon, armor. They had fashioned suits of bullet-repelling armor from plows, each complete with a helmet and weighing about 97 pounds. When the police arrived, they took up a position outside the hotel and started firing. The gang fired back, and the enemies exchanged shots for about a quarter of an hour. Kelly was wounded, shot in the left elbow and right foot. Throughout the night, reinforcements arrived, and police, trackers, and civilian volunteers surrounded the hotel, for a total of about 30 men. Spates of shooting were exchanged intermittently. While his gang fired as a distraction, Kelly snuck out of the hotel. At some point, Byrne made a toast while drinking whiskey at the bar, saying, "Many more years in the bush for the Kelly gang." Moments later, a stray bullet passed through a small gap in his armor and struck his femoral artery. He bled out instantly. At dawn, the gang allowed the women and children to leave the hotel. The freed hostages were investigated as they approached the police line to ensure that the outlaws were not attempting to escape in disguise. Meanwhile, Kelly, dressed in his armor and armed with 3 handguns, rose out of the bush and attacked the police from the rear. The police scattered and fired back, but Kelly still advanced, seeming almost inhuman with his odd, impenetrable armor. Kelly taunted the police as he came, calling for his gang to shoot, which they did. Realizing that the figure's legs were unprotected, a police fired with his shotgun, tearing apart Kelly's hip and thigh. The outlaw staggered, then collapsed against a log and moaned, "I'm done, I'm done." A sergeant went to disarm Kelly, but Kelly got in a final shot, blowing the sergeant's hat off and burning the side of his face.
Cool.
Meanwhile, the hotel siege continued. Female hostages had confirmed to the authorities that Dan Kelly and Hart were still alive in the hotel. At 10 a.m., a white handkerchief was waved out of the front door, and immediately afterwards, about 30 male hostages came out. The police ordered the hostages to the ground and checked them individually. 2 were arrested for being known Kelly sympathizers. Unwilling to storm the hotel, by mid-afternoon the police decided to set it on fire. The wind stirred up the flames and the building began to quickly burn. Matthew Gibney, a priest, entered the burning structure in an attempt to rescue anyone inside. He discovered the bodies of Dan and Hart, though it wasn't clear if they committed suicide or died from the fire. As a result of the siege, 4 hostages died and several more were injured. Kelly was shot in the left foot, left leg, right hand, left arm, and twice in the groin area.
So
although no
he
bullet
wasn't
had penetrated his
surely.
arm. Kelly survived his bullet wounds to stand trial at Melbourne in October 19, 1880. He was charged with the murder of 3 policemen, various bank robberies, the murder of Sherritt, resisting arrest at Glenrowan, and a host of minor infractions. He was convicted and sentenced to death by hanging. Despite street rallies across Melbourne demanding a reprieve for Kelly, and a petition for clemency with over 32,000 signatures presented to the governor's private secretary, on November 11, 1880, Ned Kelly, aged 25, was hanged at the Melbourne jail. In March 1881, the Victorian government created a royal commission to review the conduct of the Victoria Police during the Kelly outbreak. After 6 months of investigation, the commission produced a report exposing widespread police corruption. This resulted in many police officers being reprimanded, demoted, or dismissed. Today, Ned Kelly is seen as a folk hero, a legend that's passed into myth. He's thought of as brave and daring. Some even see him as an Australian Robin Hood. Numerous books, movies, and songs have been written about him. Kelly memorabilia has been purchased by collectors for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Kelly's armor is on display in the State Library of Victoria. Testament to the epic shootout, the helmet, breastplate, backplate, and shoulder plates show a total of 18 bullet marks. In your eyes, was Ned Kelly a rebellious Robin Hood or just a criminal?
It's a tricky one. That's a tricky one, and I can certainly understand why people would think he's a criminal, and why people would think he's not an inspiration necessarily, but would sympathise with his actions. Right from the start, he would have had a tough upbringing. His dad was seen as a criminal. He didn't do that much to warrant being shipped over to Australia, obviously, but that was what happened back then. And as a lot of my Australian subscribers have said, they've been dumped in paradise. But I think the upbringing, with the corruption that there was, and I'm sure that there certainly would have been, if there is now, there definitely would have been back then. If you're always seen to be up to no good, even when you're not, eventually, if you can't beat them, join them, sort of situation. What's the chances you are then gonna cause trouble? However, so that's the side I sympathise with, the corruption side of things, and if there's things he didn't do. So that's why I would sympathise. However, he did go robbing banks. He did murder people. He did hold people hostages. Whether he treated them well or not, I don't know if that even is a valid sort of thing to say, that he had hostages but he treated them well. Is that okay? I don't know. It doesn't really matter if he was good or bad, or a hero or not a hero. Clearly, a lot of people think he is like a Robin Hood style character. I think I've got to stay on the fence. I've got to stay on the fence because I can appreciate the tough upbringing he had and the tough, I say early years. He didn't live that long, so you know what I mean. He had a tough start in life. Police are dodgy. Not all the time, but it's interesting learning about him. And I think the fact that, for example, his armor is in the museum, that's interesting. The fact that they thought of keeping it. Who at that time thinks, I'm going to keep that? You know, surely it's just a piece of junk, but people think of keeping it. I'm so undecided. Normally after watching a video, I have my opinion made up, but I'm so undecided if Ned Kelly was good or bad, a hero or not. I really can't decide. Let me know what you think. In the comments down below, give me your briefly, give me your thoughts on Ned Kelly. Good, bad, ugly. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.